Lagi ya. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to visiting lecture today. For everyone, to those who have entered the room, we're about to begin, so please have a seat and make yourself comfortable. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Honorable Dr. Sharmini Abdullah as a Research Fellow Center of Excellence for Social Innovation and Sustainability from Universiti Malaysia Perlis. And a very warm welcome to all participants and students from STEKOM University. Is it indeed a pleasure to have all of you on this memorable occasion? And I would like to thank God for gathering us here in a visiting lecture program regarding business communication, exploring effective business communication strategy. Before we begin, please allow me to read our agenda this afternoon. First, there will be start class presentation by Dr. Sharmini Abdullah, and finally, there will be a question and answer session after the presentation, and continue with the pre-photo session at the end. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, we will start this event today, delivered by Dr. Sharmini. The time is yours. Thank you.
Right, Assalamualaikum, and thank you very much, Miss Chairperson. All right, so I guess, can we start direct or how? Okay, I'll just proceed with projecting my slides and I will proceed with the presentation for this afternoon. All right, just give me 1 second. Okay, is everything clear? Can all of you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay, just that I don't know why the background is sort of quite distracting, but never mind. All right, okay, so I will start the topic of my lecture for today. All right, it is business communication.
Pardon, Miss.
Yeah.
Do you sing big song for the PPT?
Oh, all right. Yeah, wait, let me see. Maybe it's mine. Just let me check. Okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
It's all on. Okay.
For now, it's okay.
I think it's mine.
Yeah.
No, none, right? Okay. All right. Sorry. I was actually at a class earlier on and I was doing a quiz with them. I forgot to switch it off.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Okay. Apologies for that interruption, or I will again start. Okay. Just let me share my slide. Okay. Okay, so is the background now silent? I mean, can you all hear my voice? Is there any other audio interruptions?
No, it's perfect.
Okay, all right. So I will start again, okay? A very good afternoon to all of you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. All right, so the topic of today's lecture is actually business communication, effective business communication strategies, okay? So I'm Dr. Sharmini Abdullah. Okay, as introduced earlier by our Miss Chairperson, I'm from the Department of Languages and General Studies, the Faculty of Business and Communication, UniMap, and also I'm part of the Center of Excellence and Social Innovation and Sustainability, CoESIS, from Universiti Malaysia Perlis. All right. What you will learn today, or what I will actually brief about or talk about, is on these following topics. Okay. So firstly, we will delve into why effective communication matters in business. What are the key elements of effective communication? Choosing the right communication channel, adapting communication style for business success, overcoming barriers to communication in business, and we'll also look into effective communication in the business environment. And then I'll conclude, and I'll have a brief Q&A session before we actually end the lecture for today. Okay. Okay, now why effective communication matters in business. All right, as all human beings or all living things, we communicate every day, whether it is verbally or non-verbally. Okay, communication is a lifeblood of any successful business operation. You cannot conduct any business without communication, whether it is verbal or non-verbal. Effective communication leads to improved team collaboration, enhance customer relationships, increase productivity and efficiency, and most importantly, it will reduce conflicts and misunderstandings between the team members and also with the business counterparts. Now, what are the two key elements of effective communication? There are two, okay? One is to be able to provide or give a clear and concise message or messaging. Okay, what does that mean? It means crafting messages that are easy to understand and free of ambiguity. Okay, I've given some examples here. So try to keep to simple language. Okay, use simple words, short sentences. For instance, rather than using bombastic words or jargons or technical terms like the example given above here. So instead of saying we aim to optimize synergistic paradigms to facilitate exponential growth, you can easily simplify it in our goal is to improve collaboration and achieve significant growth. Both has a same meaning, a same notion, a same direction, but one is used in a language that is easy to understand. Okay, another example, instead of using we intend to leverage our core competencies for maximum strategic, all right, you can actually use, we will use our strengths to gain a competitive edge. All right, okay, so far can everyone here follow me? Yes. Okay, if you have any questions, you can, or maybe you can keep it for the Q&A later. So I'll proceed now to the next slide. I'll just give you more examples. Okay. More examples on how you can use plain and simple language to convey complex business concepts. Okay. And what I mean by easy to understand and avoiding ambiguity. So instead of using our fiscal strategy is centered around enhancing profitability via optimized revenue cost management. You can use simplified language as in we plan to increase profits by improving how we earn and spend money. Okay, so in the business world, there's a lot of business technical jargon that you tend to use. Sometimes we feel we want to use to impress our business counterparts or our team members, but actually we're making things more complicated. So it's always easier to stick to simplified language. All right, so another example, instead of the innovative integration of cutting-edge technology will revolutionize our operations, you can substitute or use by using advanced technology, we significantly improve our efficiency. All right. All right, another key element of effective communication is active listening. Okay, so this is what we're doing now. Okay, I'm doing the talking. You're supposed to be listening, not passively, but actively. So what do we, or how do we define active listening? Okay, active listening helps build rapport. Why it's important? Because it fosters better understanding. It improves the quality of communication in both personal and professional relationships. Okay, when you actually implement or you advocate active listening during any communication, whether it's verbal or non-verbal, it encourages listening among team members. Okay, you must, any organization in a business context now, all right, you must encourage active listening among your colleagues or team members. All right, and when during your client interaction, so when you're actually facing or having meetings and interactions with your client, you must also provide or pay or give attentive listening. Okay, and attentive listening is just not listening, it's also giving attention to how the body language is, what are your facial expressions, and of course the tone of your voice. In order to have a positive feedback, you must also use positive communicative terms. Okay, so whether it's verbal or non-verbal, it has to be positive and confident, especially when you're dealing in meetings and handling presentations. Okay, let's look at some ways of how we can actually advocate active listening. Okay, firstly, you must understand what is active listening. Okay, active listening is a communication technique where, all right, the listener fully concentrates, understands, responds, and remember what the speaker is saying. So you must be focused to what is being said. You must understand. That's very critical. It wouldn't work if you don't understand what is being communicated. You must be able to give the right response, and you must remember what was informed. Okay. It also involves giving complete attention to the speaker. So this is the non-verbal cue where you're focusing on verbal and non-verbal cues. In terms of if there's a smile, you give a smile back. Okay. If the person is talking, you do not want to say, you give a nod. All right. And you provide feedback to ensure you understand. Okay. So just not giving a blank face. So sometimes you don't want to verbally respond. You can actually respond using your body and your facial expression through bodily movements like a nod or a thumbs up or a smile, all right, which indicates to the speaker that you're actually paying attention to what is being said. Okay. Now, what examples of active listening? There are many, okay? So this is mostly on physical part, the most easiest where everyone always informs, right? When you communicate, what must you do? Maintaining eye contact, especially with the person that you're speaking to, and as a listener to the person you're being spoken to, okay? So when engaged in a conversation, you maintain eye contact with the speaker. Why? Because it tells the speaker that you're being attentive and you're having interest in what they're saying, okay? Nodding and smiling, like I mentioned earlier. So these are non-verbal cues, okay? So you nod and you smile to indicate that you're actively listening, because sometimes you do not speak when another person is speaking, but how do you show that you're actually being attentive? So you give a small nod or you smile to show that you are listening, and in a way you're encouraging the speaker to continue what he or she is saying or communicating, okay? Some other more examples, okay? Paraphrasing, okay? This is when you're able to communicate with the speaker. You can speak with the speaker, all right? Sometimes it's not in a 2 or 3 or in a group conversation. So apart from just giving non-verbal cues, you can actually also paraphrase or restate what the speaker has said. You repeat certain important phrases or statements to show that, or to indicate to the speaker that you understand, right? And you are following the conversation, okay? And then you can also ask open-ended questions, okay? Sometimes it doesn't mean that when a person is speaking, you're not allowed to question. You should question, because it in a way tells the speaker that you're very interested and you want to know more. All right, so when you ask open-ended questions, You are in a way informing the speaker to elaborate on their thoughts, ideas, and also feelings. And it shows that you're actually very interested in what they're actually presenting to you. Okay, all right. Avoiding interruptions. Okay, you must always ensure that the speaker finishes first before you interject into a conversation. Because when you interrupt somebody in the midst of speaking, it shows that you are actually not listening to the speaker. Okay. All right. You can also acknowledge and validate the speaker's emotions by reflecting back how they are feeling. That means sometimes speakers share their personal experiences or their emotions. You can actually make a comment on that. So that shows that you have been paying attention to the conversation. Okay. All right. And you must, this is quite important, especially when we're doing online engagement. When it's face-to-face, it's not too bad because you get to see the person as, you know, in front of you. But, you know, in online platforms or channels, distractions is very, very, how to say, it interrupts with the conversation or communication that's going on. So always try to minimize distractions. Focus solely on the conversation so that it tells the speaker that you're giving the speaker, he or she, your full attention. Okay, and you can also use verbal clues. Okay, like, I see, go on, tell me more, to encourage the speaker to continue sharing. Okay, all right. The quiz, I'll leave it to the end. Okay, all right. So I'll continue with the lecture. And at the end, we'll have a short quiz on what you have listened to. All right. So now let's see what kind of channels that is right for communication. Okay, I think all of you are already familiar. Remember, when we communicate, we don't only communicate face-to-face, especially now. We have a lot of, how to say, off-site communication that's happening, okay? So of course, the normal is face-to-face meetings where everybody sits and you're close to the speaker and to the listener. Another way of communication is emails, and normally it's always used for formal communication and documentation, which is quite a common communication channel that's used in business environments, okay? You have phone calls, sometimes you don't have time to wait for a response from an email or a text, so you give a phone call. And normally you use it for urgent matters and quick updates, all right? And you also have instant messaging, like what we are all very familiar with, like WhatsApp, Telegram, Line, so many platforms that we actually use for texting, and even using these platforms to actually share documents as well, because sometimes it's much more faster than or more convenient than the email. And of course, lastly is what we're having now, like a video conferencing, where sometimes you have it for remote team meetings and client interviews, okay? So these are some of the common communication channels that we use in our everyday work or even personal or formal settings. So it's very important in a business context to choose the right communication channel to actually relay what you want to say. All right, so you can't use all these channels for every setting. There are some settings that are only used for certain formal environments or formal purposes, and some you may use for informal, depending on the team member and also on the client and also on the purpose of the whole communication. So make sure you're aware, when should we use face-to-face meetings? When are emails appropriate? When should I make a phone call? Is instant messaging appropriate? Can I use video conferencing? So these are the things that you must consider, you know, when you're actually choosing the right communication channel. And another important element that you must consider is in business context, you're always meeting with all kinds of people from different backgrounds, from diversified cultures, especially if you're dealing with international clients or partners or even colleagues. You know, some of you would work in international companies where you have team members from different parts of the world all working together. So you need to be able to tailor your communication to the recipient's preferable needs. Okay, so what are the two things? You need to consider their cultural differences. Each culture has its own do's and don'ts. So it's very important that when you are actually facing or dealing or handling or managing another person from a different background, cultural background, that you need to consider the cultural taboos, do's and don'ts before you actually engage, okay? And you must also adjust your communication style based on the business context. If it's formal, and then you have to go formal. If it's informal, and then you will be in an informal context. So always determine what is the context of communication first. All right, whether it's formal and informal, then everything else flows smoothly. Okay. Am I going too fast? Is everything okay?
Okay.
Now, earlier on, we looked at different types of communication channels, and then how one must consider cultural differences and the business context, okay, in order to ensure effective communication. Another way is also you need to be able to adapt communication style for the success of your business. Okay, so this is actually what we mean when we say you must consider your team, your recipient, whoever is going to actually receive, okay, whatever information or communication ideas. Okay, you must always look into these two aspects. Okay, so when you're looking into cultural differences, you must consider email communication. All right, this is very important because it's actually, it reflects on the image of your business or your company. Okay, so I give an example why, okay, why this is important. So say you have an international client. Okay, so it's from a different country, obviously, when you're doing business. Okay, so you need to be able to use the appropriate, how to say, writing language and also sign-offs that align with their cultural norms. Okay, for instance, you're going to write an email to someone in Japan, okay? So they always begin with dear and they end with best regards. Or if you're going to communicate to somebody in a different part of the world, for instance, in Arab Saudi, okay, they do not use the recipient's first name. They will use the recipient's last name. So they'll go dear Miss and Miss Abdullah, for instance. And they do not conclude with best regards, but with sincerely. So these are actually small telltale signs that indicate to your client that, you know, it advocates effective communication because it does not offend whoever that you are communicating with, whether it's a written communication or a verbal communication. Okay, so that is why it's very important to consider cultural differences. Okay, every person who comes from a different culture has a particular way of communication. All right, so in the business world, it's very important to take note to address these cultural differences, even though it may be very small or it may appear as unimportant, but it actually is. And then, of course, you have the meeting etiquette, for instance, that what we're having now. Okay, nowadays, I mean, we don't need to be face-to-face. You don't need to go to the place of a meeting. You know, you can always do it from one location and conduct it online. So for instance, we're doing a virtual meeting with international partners. You must consider the differences in the time zone. Okay, so don't, like, say if you're in the daytime, you must consider that it's also in the daytime in whichever, how to say, in your client's country, for instance, right? Like maybe Malaysia and Indonesia, there's not much of a difference. But if you're going to talk with somebody from the US, you need to consider the time difference to ensure that when you are having the meeting, it's also during working hours for your client or for the person that you're going to communicate with. All right. And even during the engagement, if it's a virtual meeting or even it's a face-to-face, you must always give sufficient time for any participant to speak and express themselves, especially if, how to say, the language is not so competent. So you have to give more time for the other person to actually explain themselves. Okay, all right. So meeting etiquette is also another element that you must consider or you must implement in order for a communication style to be successful. Okay. All right, so when you're doing negotiations and decision making, this is a very common practice in any business context. Okay, this is what we do normally, right? I mean, you're actually negotiating better deals, okay, or you want to get a certain tender or a certain contract. So this is where your decision making and negotiation skills come in, okay? So when you are actually dealing with international partners or clients, you must be aware of their communication styles. Sometimes styles that we think are not aggressive is deemed as aggressive and rude in a different culture, okay? So you must pay attention to all these small details, okay? Certain gestures, facial expressions, non-verbal cues, okay? All right, so you must study all this first before you get into the actual negotiation or decision-making, conversation or communication, okay? All right. So this is the third one. So you must try to adapt your communication styles with the cultures of your partners or clients, okay? And then you must also pay attention to language and terminology, okay? When communicating with non-native English speakers, okay, which is quite common in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Thailand, okay, because our first language is not English. So that is why it goes back to the first key element in effective communication. Use language that is easy to understand and has less ambiguity. So when you're communicating, use clear, simple language to avoid misunderstandings. Don't use slang, don't use idioms, or use complex technical terms that are not easily understood. Even though it sounds wow, but actually if the person doesn't understand, then your communication has failed, all right? So avoid colloquial expressions, because sometimes it can offend the person that you are communicating with. Always study the background of your person that you're going to talk to or present to before you actually use terms or colloquial expressions or slangs and so on, okay? And then comes to your presentation and materials that you use to help you conduct the presentations that you're doing now, okay? It helps. Materials or aids actually help to enhance an effective communication, especially when you're away, when you're doing a remote kind of presentation where you're not actually face-to-face. But even during face-to-face, so you need to prepare presentation materials to help listeners to understand what you're trying to convey or communicate, okay? So if you're looking at international audience, consider the cultural aspects of your presentation materials. So sometimes you use a lot of images. So you have to ensure whatever image you use doesn't offend the client. So you need to do a lot of background research before you actually proceed with whatever images or symbols that you want to use during your presentations, because if you're not culturally aware, it may be sensitive, it may be misunderstood, and it may jeopardize the whole communication, okay? So that is why you must always be very sensitive to the cultural differences of whoever that you're going to be speaking to or communicating with, okay? Okay, and then one very important thing that I think majority of people always do not do is follow up with the communication. I think it's quite common that everyone has virtual meetings off and on, whether it's within the same university or the same company, or even with another company or with another company in a different country. All right. This is why some businesses do not prosper, because you don't do a follow-up. Every time when you have a meeting, all right, whether it's going to be face-to-face or whether it's a virtually conducted meeting, you must ensure that you follow up what was discussed and share the key points and discussion notes with the important parties, so that everybody goes back with the same understanding. And whatever that is being discussed or needs to be attained will be attained in how it is meant to be. So that is why this is what most people tend to forget. After a meeting ends, they think everybody understands and, everyone proceeds with what they need to do. But the most important thing is actually making sure whoever that's in charge, okay, that you actually send or share a copy of the key points and discussion notes with every member of the meeting, whoever attended the meeting or whoever that was present, to ensure that everybody is clear on what they need to do and in agreement. So this avoids misunderstanding, miscommunication, and arguments that may arise because of not fully understanding what was being informed or communicated. Okay, all right. Okay, by adapting or fitting your communication to the recipient's needs, you consider their cultural differences, you can actually foster a very respectful and close international business relationship. This is how you maintain business relationship with international partners. Always consider cultural differences and cultural practices. Be sensitive. Do not advocate about your culture, but rather put other cultures first, all right, during any form of communication, okay? Okay, we looked at elements of effective communication, how we can actually implement certain verbal and non-verbal cues to ensure that the communication is effective, what kind of aspects that we need to consider, okay, in order to ensure that we do not, cause misunderstanding and miscommunication. Another aspect of effective communication is also having to overcome barriers to communicate in business context. Okay, for any form of communication, there would be barriers, as in any situation in life. Okay, so first you need to identify what are the barriers first. Only then you can overcome. Am I right? Okay, so normally in communication, there are three main barriers. Okay, the first one is language. Okay, so like I have repeated quite a number of times, always stick to plain language. Okay, avoid technical jargon when communicating with non-specialists. What do I mean with non-specialists? That means people who are not from your field or who may not have the same knowledge and understanding that you have on a certain issue. Okay, so that's why you need to stick to simple language and do not use technical jargon. Using technical jargon doesn't mean that you are proficient in a language, actually. Okay, because it can cause confusion to those who are not or who are not from the same field as you are. You must be also patient with non-native English speakers. Sometimes you have to address with a number of speakers that are not proficient or competent in the language you're speaking to. And there'll be a tendency of these audience or recipients that would be interrupting your conversation. So in order to show understanding, you need to give time and offer clarification. So don't be angry or don't cut them off. Rather, listen, ask them, and explain in the most simplest language that you can in order to ensure that whatever that has been spoken or being addressed is understood clearly. Okay, so this is the first barrier, language barriers. Okay. Second is emotional barriers. Okay, remember, communication that takes place is not always pleasant, especially in the business boardroom. Okay, there's always voice raising. Okay, sometimes when you need to negotiate a deal, you need to be more, how to say, not rude, but you need to show emphasis. Okay, so sometimes your voice may go up. You may get frustrated if the other person doesn't seem to understand what you're trying to say. Okay, so you must always, how to say, show empathy and understanding, especially when there's a conflict happening in the discussion that is taking place. Okay, do not impose, even though you may be the director, you may be the biggest boss, all right, or the CEO. I mean, you may hold the highest post in the company, but that doesn't mean that you can direct your underlings or your teammates, you know, in a rude manner. So you must always show understanding, control your emotions, even though how angry you may be. You know, you have to remain composed and professional. I mean, that's very important in a business context because it reflects, not only you, it reflects the image of the whole company. Okay. So always try to be empathy or show understanding to those, maybe your teammates, you know, maybe your colleagues, all right, that you understand what they're going through, and you always need to find a point where you can resolve those conflicts to ensure that, you know, effective communication is taking place. Okay, so that is why this is quite difficult to control, especially in our Asian culture where we go by status. So sometimes when you get scolded at, you just have to keep quiet, right? But actually that it's not so. So there are always ways of addressing conflicts. Voice need not be raised. You can always talk things over in a more understanding way. Right? So this is actually quite difficult, but it's also very important. Okay. So first, language barriers. Second, emotional barriers. Okay. And lastly, noise and distractions. Okay. We are always hearing a lot of things depending on where the conversation or communication is taking place. So if you're going to set a certain time and place, always choose a suitable and quiet environment for important business dealings and calls. Okay. So if you know that, say your building is an area where construction is going around, so you always take note when they're actually doing the work. So don't have your meetings and so on during that time. So do it at a time where it is quiet. So you need to be actually very sensitive to all these. Don't just look at, oh, I need to have the meeting in the morning, but rather also consider the environment at that time, because when there's less distraction, people tend to understand you more. You don't have to shout over noises, okay? And then it's also important, I mean, face-to-face is not as bad, but still it will provide as an interruption, but it is even more so if you're doing with virtual interactions, like what happened earlier when I was starting. I didn't realize that I just finished the game with my class, and, you know, I forgot to switch it off. So there's this background music. So it causes a disruption, isn't it? So that is why these are the three main barriers that you need to overcome in order to achieve an effective communication. Okay, language, emotional, noise, and distractions. Okay. All right. So we have looked at so many aspects now, correct? Okay, firstly, we looked at why effective communication is important in business, okay? And then I talked about two key elements in effective communication, okay? And then, of course, I also exposed to all of you how to choose the right communication channel for the right context, okay? And why you need to adapt communication styles. That means considering cultural differences of the person you're talking to, okay, to ensure an effective communication takes place. And then we actually looked at the kind of barriers that we all face, okay, and why it's very important to identify, understand, and overcome these barriers so that we can actually foster an effective communication. Okay, that is more in a general context. Okay, how do you actually foster communication in a business environment? How different is it from a normal environment? Okay, when you're doing business environment, that's, like I said, you always are doing dealings, you're negotiating, and you're trying to achieve targets. Okay, of course, you need to convey information and you need to do a lot of presentations. So how do you ensure that everybody is clear on what they need to do? Okay, it should always be a two-way communication within the superior and the underlings. It shouldn't be a one-way. You shouldn't just be the superior or the person in charge always giving instructions, but rather you must also receive feedback from your team members. So one important thing is actually to always encourage open and transparent communication among team members within the same department or other departments. All right, so like I said, it has to be a two-way communication. Okay, so how do we do it? So you implement an open communication. What is an open communication? Open communication means enabling whoever that has been given instructions or normally it's instructions, okay, to actually ask or provide feedback based on whatever instruction that has been given. It's not just yes, sir, or no, sir. You know, it's like enabling whoever that's been given the task to actually ask, should I do like this? Can I do it like this? What about doing this? Okay, this is how you actually foster a positive communication style in the working environment. And you must always encourage your team members to share what are their concerns if they're having, or they may have a better suggestion than you have. Okay, during your regular team meeting, some companies, they meet every morning, like 7 o'clock before the office starts. So it's during this time that you actually implement open communication, because when you enable people to share more, you actually foster a closer relationship. And I think you will attain the KPIs or your attainments even faster, because there is an already understanding between the superior and the team members. Okay. And then it also helps to ensure that everybody knows what they need to do. Everyone's on the same page. And that will ensure that whatever problem the company may be facing would solve in a faster mode or in a better orientation. Okay. So that is why it's always important to encourage open communication with your team members. Be transparent. Don't hide things. Okay. When you start hiding things or prevent people from voicing out, that it's where the communication breaks down and problems will arise. All right. Another aspect that you need to consider, okay, you also need to promote a culture of constructive feedback to foster improvement. What do I mean by that? Okay, normally sometimes when we make suggestions, or I think it's quite common, especially if you're in a working environment. Okay, sometimes you may present something, okay, and you will get a negative feedback. Okay, and that is actually not good. Okay, I didn't say not good in a sense. What I mean is constructive feedback can be negative and positive, but it shouldn't be demeaning. All right. So when you're giving feedback, if you feel that something that was presented, it's not up to the expectations, you do not criticize the person, but rather offer suggestions on how they can improve in an indirect manner. So this is what we mean by constructive feedback. You do not put the person down. You do not criticize the person for the work that they had presented, even though it may be below par and not up to your standard. You may be disappointed, because that will encourage your team members to actually work harder and perform better. Okay. So how can you actually promote such a culture? All right. So you give and receive constructive feedback. You also allow your team members to also address you, even though you may be the big boss. Okay, ask their opinions on what was, what is being done or what has been done, or whatever suggestions or action plans that you may have for your team members. Another thing is actually ensuring there's feedback. Okay, for anything that is being done or conducted, it's very important for you as the person or superior in the team to actually obtain feedback, because it's important for you to actually improve as a better person. And whatever maybe action plans that you have actually implemented, is also very important to actually obtain feedback in order to ensure that whatever action plan or processes that has been undertaken is actually effective. So this is what we mean by promoting a culture. So it's not only a yes sir or yes ma'am kind of culture, but rather I would also like to hear what you think on what we are doing or what we have done and so on. So it should be a two-way communication. So managers and team members must regularly provide feedback. It can be negative. It doesn't always need to be positive, but it needs to be constructive, where people will actually identify what went wrong and will actually improve on what needs to be improved. In this way, you will help each other. So that is what we mean by effective communication. Okay. So that's the second part on how you can actually foster the second element. Okay, first you have an open communication. Second, you must always ensure there's a culture of positive, constructive means positive feedback, whether it is on a negative aspect or a positive aspect. Okay. Lastly, how you can actually foster effective communication in a business environment. You must emphasize the importance of clear communication in meetings, setting your objectives or attainments, and of course also addressing customer needs. Okay, how do we do that? Okay, clear communication is the core of any business success. So what does that mean? That means when you have a particular project or a particular task, you must ensure that the project goals, okay, and whatever your customer needs or require is actually understood by your team members. Sometimes you may say A, but your team members actually understand it as that. So this is where the communication breakdown. So that is why you must ensure that your team members have a very clear picture on what they need to do. What are the attainment targets, what the objectives, and what do the customer need, so that everybody plays their role correctly to please, because in any business context, you have a client or a consumer that you need to please, correct or not? Because it's a business or a money-making industry. So if your customer is not satisfied, you have not been successful. So this is why it's very important to ensure there's a clear communication, happening. Any communication, whether it's in a meeting or it's a normal discussion that you're having with your team members. Okay, and then it will, of course, help the business to deliver high quality service or products and meet the customer's expectations. All right. Okay. Can you follow me? All right. Can. Okay. So I've come to the end, but I'm going to play a quiz, but I'll just conclude why it's very important. So effective communication is the backbone of any successful business operations and customer relationship. Okay, as how we are going. So many things that I highlighted to ensure that a successful business means you have a very good relationship with all your clients. Okay, if you don't have a good relationship with your clients, then it shows that your business will not be successful. So you need to embrace and practice clear, active, all right, communication to achieve business excellence. All right. So maybe I'll open to Q&A, or shall we go to the quiz first?
Quiz first is okay.
Right, okay. Okay, so I will, let me stop presenting this. How many participants do we have?
36.
36, huh? Okay, so, all right, let me stop sharing first. Okay, and then let me go to our quiz. So only 4 questions actually, it's not much, but let me share. So on Kahoot. Okay, so maybe this is the game pin. So let's see. There's only 4 questions there, so not much actually.
Can you share
Oh, go
the
back.
barcode? Yeah, thank you.
Just in case I prepared actually extra platforms, just in case what? Does it work? Or all cannot go in at once?
Maybe you can start, Miss.
Okay, there's only 6. Okay, I'll start. All right. Let's see. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, well done to Haidar and Novita. The other 3, why you didn't have time? Are you all having internet connectivity problems? Okay, so well done to Haidar and Novita. Next. Okay, let's see. Right, Haidar again. Okay, you have Fabriana in the second place and Novita. What about Vidya and Joko? Do you need more time? Maybe you all are having internet connectivity problem. Okay, everyone got right, good. Okay, well done. Okay, Haida, you're running first, and then you have Novita, Fabriana, Faiz, and Vidya. Okay, final question. Okay. Okay, let's see. The answer is finishing the speaker's sentences. You do not interrupt the speaker. So having so Fabriana, well done, third place. Then you have Novita in second place, okay. And finally, you have the, okay, Haida. All right, congratulations to the three of you. All right. Okay, so we are done. Okay, wait, let me just switch it off. All right, so we have a question. Oh, sure.
I will go to for the question Q&A session, Miss.
Yes, all right.
Okay. For all participants, if you want to ask question, you can raise your hand or you can write in the room chat. Okay, for first question, we have the question from Mr. Amin Tohari. What is social innovation and I'm sorry, what is social innovation and what is it important for us? And then why and how above? Thank you.
Social innovation, okay, all right. Why is it important? Okay. Let me just taken aback. Wait, just let me. All right. What are social innovations? Anybody else would like to share in the crowd here? We have a number of you. Everyone is pretty silent. So what do you think is social innovation? We can ask the audience actually. I think I was doing the talking for 40 minutes. So all of you should be aware, what is social innovation? What do you think is social innovation? Or anybody can give me an example of what are social innovation? Okay, I think if you're talking in terms of a business context, okay, it's what actually I presented earlier on. When you're considering social innovations, actually considering your employees' needs at the same time, or your team members, whoever that you're actually communicating that's in your team. Okay, all right. So that is what I mean when I mention about making sure that you actually apply open communication. Okay, when you actually address or you implement open communication, you're actually making your employees or your team members or even your counterparts feel that they're included in the whole process. So it's not just a one way where the manager or the director gives an instruction and expects everything to be done. But you actually create an avenue where your team members can actually also question, address, and voice up what they feel, their suggestions, and provide constructive feedback. So that is what social innovation means. In a normal business context, we normally don't actually, I guess most of us are familiar with only receiving orders, right? If you're actually on the receiving end, and if you're actually on the one that's giving instructions, you only give instructions. There's always a one-way communication. It's like what I give, you do. All right. So I guess that is, it's all right. So I guess that is, I hope I answered your question on what is social innovation and how actually we can go about addressing it. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. And the next question, is it talking, Miss?
Yep.
Okay. And then the next, how how do we control our emotion when talking to the elderly? Because sometimes it will be slower to speak and we have to and we have to be very patient to talk to the elderly. This question from Miss Fabriana. Thank you.
Right. So Miss Fabiana, all right. How do we address people who are elderly than us? But can I ask, like, in what context are you actually I mean, your question is addressing what context? Is it in a formal or informal context? Or is in a general context? So if you're looking in terms of a business context where you're addressing your superiors who may be very, very much older to you, all right, so obviously you need to consider the person's, how to say, you have to speak slower, obviously, okay? So if the person is actually talking to you and you are unable to, how to say, you need the person to talk louder, then you need to actually, you can actually ask the person to speak louder, all right? I mean, as how it goes with any Asian culture, you always deal with people who are older to you with much more respect. You need to be patient, obviously, and you need to allow them to finish their sentence before you interject or you ask or you respond, all right? So did I answer your question? So I think it goes two ways, whether it's informal or formal. You know, it doesn't need to be in a formal setting to show more respect. You know, I think in any circumstance, if you're addressing anyone who's older, all right, can be a year older, 10 years older, 20 years older, you need to always be attentive, listen first before you respond, okay? Any other questions?
Two again, and one from me. I will to communicate where we must understand the character of what people like and are interested, how to deal with it. Is that true? Do we need to study psychology so that our communication runs smoothly in the business world to understand someone? Thank you, Miss.
Right. I don't think you need to get a degree in psychology to understand somebody. Okay, but how do you actually understand an individual? It's by just looking up their background. Okay, before when you address anybody in any context, okay, especially when you do not know the person. In today's world, it's very easy to ask Mr. Google, correct? Okay, especially when you're addressing important CEOs or, you know, people from big companies, they would have their biodata or their personal details actually online. I mean, you don't need to look into their emotional needs, but rather you need to know what are their expectations, you know, how, actually now it's quite easy to study an individual by just looking up at how they speak, you know, the kind of, you know, sometimes they have a lot of, how to say, videos on that person. So you can actually study the character of the person looking at their, you know, whatever that you can find online. So you don't need to do psychology, but rather you need to do what I'll call is as a background check. So that means you're looking at what are their aspirations, you know, what are their objectives, how they actually manage the company, where they're from. You know, sometimes if they reveal their personal details, at least you know if they're married or not married, or what they like or don't like. Sometimes that is important because when you are meeting them face to face, you know, in the business world, you have to entertain your client. So in that sense, you also need to know what they like to eat, what they're allergic or not. But you don't need to do it in a, how to say, in a silent manner. You can actually also ask direct questions to the person. Is, you know, you ask them what do they want, what their expectations and what they want. Always go up direct, and of course, you also read up on whatever you can find that is available, you know, on the internet or with their personal assistant and so on. So yes, no, you don't need to study psychology because most of the answers you can actually get from their secretaries or from online, available online information that is actually already there for you to look into. Or number three, my way is always asking the person direct because that actually solves a lot of problems rather than going through a third party to find out what the person likes or don't like or needs or don't need. Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you for answering. And then the last question, what
Okay.
if someone who has an introvert personality overcome this? Because what we know is someone with this personality is very introvert and say to talk to stranger or the public. This question from Mr. Sukamto. Thank you.
All right, so I guess you're meaning in the business context in addressing employees who are introverted. All right, okay. In today's world, I think nowadays generation, many are actually so introverted in a sense that you're always on social media, but you don't know how to interact in a group. I think this is the problem which I also see here at the university. I mean, most of my students, they're very active online, but when you ask them to actually speak out in a, in an open setting where they have to be face to face, they tend to be very silent and unable to be socially apt. Okay, so how do you address employees like this? Okay, normally in any organization, there's always a saying that goes, putting the right person at the right place. So it's always the job of the manager, all right, to actually study your employees first. So characters are not, how to say, you cannot force certain things upon certain individuals, because always are born different. Some are more extroverted, some are introverted, some tend to talk a lot, some tend to talk less. So how do you maximize input on introverted is you need to study their strengths and weaknesses and putting them at the right place. So of course, for an introvert person, you don't put them as in public relations, because it requires a lot of social interaction. So if you're asking how to deal with introverted, is actually looking at what they're good at and putting them in jobs or in tasks that would actually amplify what they can actually share, you know, even though they're having an introverted nature. I don't think you can force, but you can actually encourage introverted employees by giving a one-to-one engagement. You know, you don't put them in a spot where they need to talk in front of 10 people. You can actually gradually train them or draw them out of their introvertedness by actually starting with small, you know, putting them in small groups, you know, maybe in twos, in threes, and then you can gradually work them up. If you want to draw them out now to become more extroverted. So that is my response to that question. Hope it was helpful.
Okay, thank you for answering. I think it's very clear answer from Professor. I think we don't have no more question again from the student. Before I close this event, I will go to the next session for them take a picture. Yeah, for all participants, please open your camera. We will take a picture for documentation. Bagi para peserta, bisa dinyalakan terlebih dahulu untuk kameranya. Okay. Okay, I will give 1, 2, 3. Okay, another one. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Finally, we come to the end of the visiting lecture today. We would like to say thanks to Dr. Sharmini Abdullah for their wonderful information. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. We hope this information will be beneficial for all audience. And I hope we can meet again at another event in the future with the Universiti Malaysia Perlis. Also, I would like to thanks for all participants for attending this class today and making this even more interesting. At least we hope to have more collaboration in the future. The class for today and here we have to see you soon. Thank you and have a nice day for everyone and Dr. Sharmini.
Thank you very much to everyone as well. I hope you all learned something from me today. And inshallah, I hope to see all of you all again. Thank you very much. Take care of yourselves and hope we see each other again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharmini Abdullah.
Well, I hope to see you all here in UniMap. All right, maybe we should have a physical visit one day. All right, at least having you all coming from STEKOM to UniMap, inshallah. Okay, all right. So take care. Thank you so much for having me. All right, Assalamualaikum. Thank you.
Waalaikumsalam.
Goodbye.